Suppose it's probably going to be starting now. Hi, how you doing, John?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Very good. I'm just doing the same as usual, trying to work out what links people need to come join the show in real time.
hmm
And I tend to make a ham of that. So how was your week?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to think there of. I was just thinking of a very specific, trying to think of a very specific reference, which is like, what's that thing that circus ringmasters say when they're like outside the circus and they're like, when you're saying join the show, and I was like, what is that like phrase? Like, roll up, roll no, line up,
You didn't catch it?
come up.
Line
Do you
up?
not know what I'm talking about?
Don't think I
Circus,
do. Circus people? What?
circus talk.
I'm not sure if
I think it's circus phrase,
I'm not sure I'm really
but
aware of
like,
circus
use like
phrases.
no. You are aware of this. I'm just saying it's not just a circus thing. It's like you said, like oh my god. Anyway, um, yeah, my week is okay. It's gotten the weather's nice here again, which everybody else is really happy about. But
I'm not
like
sure.
I'm just getting too warm and sunburnt again. So yeah, how's the weather there?
The weather here has
Are you
actually
still
been pretty rubbish
tapping,
for a little
tapping?
while. People have been complaining loudly, and I have agreed with their complaints. Um,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
but yeah,
Um,
there's still breaks between the rain, and we did have a lot of glorious sunshine, and I'm sure we'll have some more. So
yeah,
the plants need the water.
exactly. Like my mother always says, no, nothing other strange or unusual
Um,
news.
Not really. I moved a house a little bit. That's why we weren't here next week, along with other
Oh
busyness
yeah.
factors. It won't be a very long affair, I don't think. Um, but it should be fun. It's kind of just in the moments of decocooning and stuff like that, or yeah, my parents may remain more cocooned than I would intend to remain, sort of thing. Don't want to have a tension.
Mhm. Decocooning. What a great word.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the terminology in this whole mess is kind of funny or something. Words seem
There's
to
a
get
whole new like vocab or like
yeah.
reference point.
And then there's obviously usages that may or may not survive. You know what I mean? In terms of what people say.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
so
But yeah, it's funny how it's come into the yeah. Anyway,
I think
just
I
how language is affected by it.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, wait. So are you streaming from your new house?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Oh.
So there's a bit more background noise, and I've only got one mic this time, so I won't be in stereo, moving from one earphone to the other as I close windows and such.
Um, okay, you're almost coming down to my level, but not quite as bad. um, okay, so yes, the it was 2 weeks ago that we last chatted.
It was.
And who started? Oh yeah, sorry, Patrick, you have to do the intro as is
Oh, of
tradition.
course. So this is the Uncertain Futures, where myself and my co-host John Summers Donnelly explore the sort of landscapes of futures unknown, and we're not generally making any solid predictions about anything. Just trying to play with the ideas surrounding how things could be very different in ways that we sometimes don't think about a whole bunch. That kind of vibe. Also we reminisce upon people doing this kind of thing in the past and either being very insightful or often wrong in quite funny ways.
Yeah, we reminisce on futures past.
Yeah, yeah, very poetic.
um, yeah. Um, yeah. So can you remember? Yeah. So usually yeah, each of us has a little does a little bit, or based on a topic we've lightly researched.
Yeah.
Yeah. So last time, I think who went first last time?
That's a good question. Um, we could do it. I'm on the surely I'm on the odd numbers because I'm pretty sure I went first. Went first the first time.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Ching, I
Good. Wait.
think.
Yes, I think you're right that you went first. I think you did go first last time. Sorry. Anyway, so, okay. So I will start us then. Um, okay. So yeah, this is something that something that may be possible in the future, or maybe like an aspect of our lives and the world in the future. That I think most people don't spend that much time talking. Well, probably like a lot of things we talk about, most people don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but there's a few people who spend a lot of their time thinking about it and like invested in it, including in this case a startup. Pretty sure they're California based. That would make sense. Also for some
It's the
legal reasons that we'll see. But okay, so what do you think? So what kind of startup or company, Patrick, do you think would be before I like explain what it actually is? What do you think like a startup? What kind of startup or company would be happy to describe themselves or describe their service as 100% facial?
100% facial.
No. No. Sorry. Hang on. That was supposed to be a dramatic moment, but never mind. 100% fatal. Like fatal. Like it's gonna kill you.
Okay. Who wants to be sure? Well, I suppose the very obvious one is the anyone who's into manufacturing kit for executions. Then I think rat poison would be high.
That's a good answer, but it's incorrect.
I think poisoning animals or killing them in various ways is another likely scenario. Then
poisoning animals.
Well, poisoning rats, for example. No one wants the rat poison to almost kill the rat. They want it to, kill it entirely.
Okay, but if I tell you that like the service, so with this
this doesn't feel right now that I think about it. It's California startup.
It is directed. Like they are thinking that the people who they're gonna tell about this service, they're gonna use it themselves on themselves,
and it has to be fatal. Wow. Okay. Well, now I'm a bit stumped.
Okay. What if I told you that my inspiration for the topic this week came from Futurama? As many topics in this.
Is this the Suicide Booth? Sorry, I just saw 2 episodes of Futurama like last night, and I hadn't watched it in ages. And it was 3, and it was the first 3 episodes, and in the very beginning, Fry tries to walk into a suicide booth.
Okay. No, it's not a suicide booth, but it is. Okay, just think of like what's the like kind of longest running trope in Futurama.
I don't know. Trope is so broad a term. I find it hard to parse the different.
Okay, it's heads and jars, Patrick.
Heads and jars. It's absolutely heads and jars. Sorry, you're right. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Maybe it wasn't that obvious, but yeah. So basically, this startup is wait, what's it actually called now? I gotta find the name of it. It's called like Nectome or something like that. But basically, it's they're pitching like a mind uploading service.
In the future, but for now, we'll put your heads on ice.
Yeah, basically for now. So for now, it's brain preservation.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the point of like brain preservation would be that you preserve your brain in the hope that at some point in the future we have the technology to either upload your brain to a computer or kind of transplant it into somebody else's head, like there's I suppose there's a few options, but I suppose I'll focus a bit on the kind of a bit more on the like brain uploading, but back to the Futurama thing just briefly. That it's kind of funny because if you think about it practically, so it is possible to like preserve a brain for a certain amount of time, and it has been not that you could maybe put it back in a person or something, but there's but obviously it's complicated. There's like the blood flow, the nutrients, but also like the stimulate, like the neurological stimulate. You have to kind of stimulate some way that like there's stimulation going to the brain, getting it to do things. But also if you think about the head thing, because like severed heads and kind of them being reanimated, it's quite present in sci-fi.
Yeah.
And I was reading this interesting article about how there's just something that's very like uncanny about like there's I don't know various movies like there's this one I've never seen it, but this movie that looks cool from the 60s called The Brain That Wouldn't Die.
Okay.
About like a car crash. The scientist's wife dies in a car crash, and but then he keeps her head alive because he's hunting for a new body that he can like graft the head onto. And of course it goes horribly wrong, and like the moral of the story is
Don't graft heads.
Don't graft your wife's head to a different body. Yeah, and like so there's like a lot of different movies where there's like head, but and it's just interesting because the guy who was writing like so it's from the it was like a little article from somebody who works at the Wellcome Collection in the UK, and oh actually no, now that I see he also is like this is from a book called, it sounds fascinating, Severed: A History of Heads Lost and Heads Found. So yeah, a whole history of severed heads.
Nice.
What?
I just think that's a hilariously niche topic. I'd love to meet the person who's writing it as they're writing it and watch them explain, their subject of interest.
How did they get into this? Yeah, exactly. Like it's a Miss Frances Larson, by the way, just in case you're wondering. I think that's the thing with like especially historical. Yeah, I don't know that there's people who like, because I know it's for some reason extra curious when you're like, why are you? Because people who write historical about history, so they write about something very niche, but also like something that's like happened that's from hundreds of years ago. And you're like, interesting that you got into this.
Yeah.
Because you can understand like niches in kind of scientific research. That's like, oh, but this is something that's still like necessary. But it's like, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so Frances Larson talks about how like a severed head is like upsetting to us, or sort of just kind of somehow like disturbing because it's like both a person and a thing. Like it's an object and kind of like we also think of like the head, the face, the brain of a person of a person being like very key to their self or who they are.
Yeah.
Or else how we associate seeing someone's face, rather than if you saw like a hand or like a decapitated hand. I was going to say, doesn't make any sense. Yeah, a hand or an arm or foot, because you might be like, oh, who does that belong to? But yeah, so it's kind of fascinating because we're like, oh, it's a person, but it's not a person, it's an object, and like those things are supposed to be separate categories to us.
Yeah, there was a line in the Futurama episode that I thought was perfectly captured that. It was like it was just some commentator. He was acting as a commentator. I presumably was some commentator from the real world, introducing himself, and I've forgotten his name. We're going to call him James Darce. And he just said, "I'm James Darce's head," or "This is James Darce's head speaking," and that's just such a hilarious thing to say because, in a way, it's true if you say it right now.
If you say it, what?
Even if you have a body, it's kind of accurate to say this is Patrick's head talking.
You mean you could just, as in, you could introduce this podcast as saying, like, this is Patrick's head.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas like, does that mean like
basically it points to the fact that the head is like, it's hard to view it as an object separate from the person. It sort of we think of ourselves as existing in our heads, so you can't. A dismembered head isn't a dismembered head; it's a dismembered body, kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
On a gut level.
Yeah, it's a funny one. So like, that's the thing. Even though we do think it are like we in our heads, but yeah, if you are like we are like we talk about like, oh, our bodies. You talk about like, oh, my body's like are really. Yeah, we often talk about our bodies as if they're not us. When we say I, me, like we're thinking more. We're kind of often referencing our mind more, maybe, and then we talk about our bodies being not in shape or not the way we want them to be, or tired or whatever. But yeah, if you see decapitated head, like you're not going to be like, yeah, I don't know. It's just sort of I suppose makes us quite aware that we're not very good without our bodies, yes. Like from the neck down. Okay, sorry, faffing around here. But yeah, so then the thing of the head, so then the thing of the future of a heads in the jars, right? So, like, okay, brain in a jar, but like, obviously for the purpose of a cartoon, heads in jars make sense. But if you think about it, really, like, why would you preserve like a whole head and face? You know what I mean? Like, you could
Oh
like
yeah, that's a
try
lot
and
of.
keep the brain going, but I know maybe I'm stating the obvious here, but I was kind of just like, okay, thought experiment. You know, like this whole thing of okay, if Futurama is saying this is my want to be in this is my oh my god, sorry, I can't talk today. If Futurama is saying like, oh, these like heads in jars with faces and everything, so you can recognize them and you know they can talk back to you. But yeah, like obviously if the people's skin keeps aging, it's not going to be very practical to keep that brain there. Um, uh, yeah, so shockingly, Futurama's predictions are not exactly like scientifically viable, but
Well, yes.
uh, yes, yeah. But okay, so actually, then I was thinking, I'm trying to think of that, like, what kind of so if before I get into a bit of detail about like mind uploading, what kind of like future would this be where we would have our minds uploaded and how would we interact with each other? And I suppose um like a scenario could be that say uploaded minds are kind of in some sort of simulated world, but they might interact with people in the like real like physical world. And so I was thinking it's actually kind of more like less Futurama, more paintings in the Harry Potter universe.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison, absolutely. And it's a really interesting description of one possible outcome. I guess what I find really tricky about this whole topic, and I know that it's impossible not to think about this with a lot of them, but this idea of successfully cracking and the various problems involved in uploading a brain, it's like once that happens, it becomes immediately so much like even harder to make predictions because it just feels like it opens up a bajillion different possibilities at once, many of which are hard to understand. So like what happens if everyone who uploads and gets to interact in this information sharing system with other uploaded individuals suddenly just starts melding with them and becoming one consciousness or something like that? I don't know if that's likely. I'm not making any predictions.
I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of questions. And
one thing for sure, though, one thing that we could be sure of is if your outcome happened in any way, then there will be one big difference between the paintings and this situation, which is that the processing speed for anyone in the simulation and their experience would be much, much faster than real life would be experienced. So it would be like the paintings were constantly learning and growing and like a civilization almost.
Yeah, that is it. Yeah. But maybe we can come back to that all that thought about how the interaction could be between like these sort of like, but that's the thing, it wouldn't. Yeah, maybe we'll get to that. We'll get more to the philosophy maybe later. But yeah, just to describe, like, for anyone who's not familiar with the paintings in Harry Potter, it's basically like, so there's sorry, I just saw Dara's comment on the YouTube saying heads are important. I read that recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Jen Keen, message retracted. Oh.
Yeah. She thought we were the other uncertain
futures. Up to our usual retracting, self-censoring. Yeah, so sorry, paintings in Harry Potter. Yeah, basically it's like in Hogwarts there'll be like paintings of like an old professor or whatever, the head of the house or whoever these old wizards are who are dead. But then you can talk to them and interact with them. So that and they have all their like memories and wisdom, and then they can kind of give advice. They give advice. And they say, "Oh, there's this secret passage, blah blah." So it will be like, and I suppose that's the thing that's kind of sort of a bit present in Futurama as well. That like it means you can kind of retain the wisdom of these people, so they have their experiences and their memories, and so they're still there. But there is a sense with the paintings. It's like that there is a sense of like. Yeah, okay, it's not necessarily this person, but it is that their personhood or something. They're not actually living a life, like they're painting. They're just hanging. They don't have to eat or they don't, those things. But somehow their like knowledge and memories are there to be interacted with. So yeah, that's what that references about. So yeah, now the how to of this brain uploading. Don't try this at home. Well, it's not actually, so it's not actually possible yet, but yeah, I don't want to waste too much time by badly going into detail and trying to explain all this, but I suppose it's like there's lots of things, and not just like, it's not just like, oh, just kind of like, neuron for neuron, just like what's going on there, because we don't even really know how we would, like, the idea is that you would somehow scan the brain and like map, like scan the neural network in the brain, and like the I suppose the real complex thing in the brain is that, well, there's like billions of neurons, but there's also like probably thousands of different types of connections of those neurons. So like just the mapping of that, and then how to scan it. So we don't even know. We still don't even know how you would scan or map that. And yeah, just because of how complex our brains are. So it's not even clear how we would do it. But then the second part is obviously being able to scan it safely, and it seems like it would probably be easier to do it with like a dead brain rather than like, I don't know, something very intensive and heating up a brain too much that someone's gonna burst or something.
Yeah.
Or like a dead brain with like a electron microscope or something. So yeah, this is, and actually the technology seems to be, wouldn't be as big a hurdle as the actually knowing how to scan, like what you really need to be mapping or scanning. So I suppose the scientific understanding and the technology are two things that we're not there, but it's like theoretically this could be possible. And then the next step will be to recreate the information digitally. So you need like the computing power and like the storage space. But like those things again are probably easier than the step 1 and 2 of like how, like figuring out how you even scan or map what's going on in your brain to be able to like recreate it somewhere else, and then being able to like safely somehow scan the brain.
And I kind of do. Obviously it's you can't be sure, but I find this one, I find it kind of highly probable that at some point people could be capable of extracting that information and representing it. Then there's the separate question of whether or not they'll be interested, at whatever time that is, in recreating particular individuals now who've invested, I suppose, their brains in the particular company now. That's a different question, I suppose. But what I think back to is just the question of how absurd would it have seemed if you went to someone, I don't know, 400 years ago, some big shot scientist we knew back then or something, and said to them, when you die, I'll be able to get a little piece of your hair from your body 400 years from now and reproduce a little tiny version of you that will grow up to look the exact same. And I mean, that just wouldn't make any sense to them. The idea that information could survive would be absurd, and I think that our temptation to resist the idea that people could be brought back that way is kind of just a representation of how the violation of certain categories like life and death is something that lends us to being incredulous.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like looking, doing just a tiny bit of research on this. Like what comes up is like the whole area, or because obviously it's related, is the whole cryogenics story, which I'm not going to go into, but it is just so fascinating, especially all the like Walt Disney connection and everything, and I don't know, there is kind of a mad history of that, and then even though that's now kind of seen as like, that was all a bit kind of crazy and amateur, just trying to like freeze your body, and it's great, but I suppose that's the thing, is that so many things, when people first start, like this startup, and I was kind of poking a bit of fun at like this. Like the thing describes it aside the service is 100% fatal, because actually I can come back to that, but because
I found that weird, because most of the cryogenics people they'd have like strong ideas about the definition of death, right? So there's kind of the medical death versus legal death debate, and then medical death gets extended as a function of different life-saving technologies, and they have a different term they use for people. They're not saying he's dead, they're saying something like he's, I don't know, in care or something, like a euphemism that implies he could be woken up, and once he does, that'll mean he wasn't dead in the first place, kind of thing.
Yeah. But like, I think cryogenics was like someone wrote about it, but the guy who started actually doing it all had like no science background at all. He was just kind of an enthusiast, and then ended up having all these like people's bodies in kind of his freezer, sort of like because, or in a room that he was like kind of trying to keep cold, and he was just like, oh my god, I can't. He sort of over his head.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't gonna go into all that. But it's I think it is a kind of a bit of a slightly haphazard. You know what I mean? It wasn't exactly.
Well, even to this
rigorous.
day, like the larger companies which will take and cryogenics, I suppose now the most popular method they use is vitrification. So it's not just cooling the bodies; it's essentially replacing the liquid in the body with some solute that changes the property so that it doesn't form ice crystals when it freezes. It just gets really viscous and hard.
Some essential oils.
Yeah, it's just all about the essential oils. I mean, I think it's basically just they're just borrowing off. Even if the actual area of cryogenics or reanimation or whatever, even if that's fringe science and no one's working on it, although some people are, there's always going to be lots of researchers doing work on other things that are very relevant, and then they'll just integrate those kind of things.
There's going to be lots of what?
There's always going to be researchers working on problems that are adjacent to the stuff surrounding cryogenics or reanimation, because the people who are working on preserving organs for transplant, or people who are working on growing tissues, or people who are working on mapping the connectome for basic research in the brain, all of them are kind of, even if there's no one doing direct research on the cryogenic stuff, it's still going to continuously progress, kind of thing.
Yeah. So okay. So
Sorry.
I don't know that much more, but yeah, basically this like you're saying, it's quite feasible that at some point we'll be able to, like, say, upload our brains, and yeah, like artificial neural networks are already running like internet search engines, like self-driving cars or like smartphones, but like obviously no one has built one that has like 86 billion neurons or like connections in it, which is what the brain would be. But yeah, theoretically possible. So like then we've sort of touched on some issues, but yeah, the usual problems of like who would have access to this kind of future technology, and there's also like as we said about the Harry Potter paintings, like is it like how much of a person is it, like what kind of rights would what kind of status would those uploaded brains people would they be seen, or like you said, like would they kind of mingle with each other, would there kind of be just discrete identities, or would it be some sort of I don't know. So yeah, like what kind of status or would they have, also like legally, and would it be like persons, then there's also this, could you have a relationship in the future with like I don't even know what to call these, these uploaded minds. Yeah, and yeah, I suppose how could it be kind of like abused, or how would we interact with, like what would be the use of it, like that also.
Well, I mean, I think that like maybe it wouldn't be a binary question whether or not you'd be like in existing in the virtual world, or you had died and you were you died and existed in the virtual world, or you lived in the real one. You could easily imagine people kind of navigating through those spaces while alive as well. This is where I start to get confused when I think of the possibility of the technology, because it's just immediately.
As do I. Especially the technology. But yeah, I'm just thinking, like, what would because if we think realistically, because then these are kind of things that like we see them in sci-fi movies, and we're like, oh wow, without having to, like, I don't think it's necessarily in the conversations about should we do this or what, or what would the implications be, what kind of future would this be if this was prevalent. You don't need to necessarily know about the nitty gritty And so it's often just like this concept and like, oh, and what would that be like? But then at the same time, without having to know the nitty gritty of the technology, to kind of think like practically like, okay, how would we get from how would it end up that we would get there?
Yeah,
It's like it's going to be some kind of like big tech giants who are like going to do this. There's going to be it's like it's basically like the cloud, but with people in the cloud. Like
yeah.
So I don't know. I'm just like I wonder what would be the path. Like who is going to develop this and how much is it going to cost? What are you gonna? Is Google going to own your brain? Like I don't know.
There's a fantastic little short that I'll send to you after this, and it's just you arriving at the game screen of death or whatever, and it's presented that way, and you're presented with the tiers of virtual existence that you'll gain access to depending upon your payment. And so like the first tier is kind of typical golden greatness, like you get all this cool perks, you live a pain-free life doing whatever you want. But then the if you paid nothing, then you just basically get exposed to advertising content all the time and have to just do a shit ton of work. It's kind of terrifying.
Oh no.
But yeah, in terms of like, I suppose the question of who develops it might be suggesting that it's like it's one finite technology that gets developed instead of being perhaps like an iterative competition for these kinds of environments or something.
Oh yeah, I don't mean that there would only be one. Who doesn't have to be just one, like.
But just one is kind of terrifying. If it was just one. And
yeah, go on.
I guess the one thing that again makes me sort of a bit optimistic about it not being nightmarish for those in a simulation is that it's actually so much cheaper to provide for a simulated person as
Patrick's all for it. Let's transfer to a digi-state.
Well, I do
annoying physical bodies to clothe and feed and.
Yeah, but most I think most human misery, the source of it is not like an active attempt to make people miserable. It's a failure to, consider it or to develop systems that function as they should. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of resources and all that kind of things. And I just think all those dynamics change once you're in a virtual system. I think it would be very logical to grant full. I also, just as a throwaway, think that anyone in those virtual systems should be considered a human and have personhood, etc.
I'm just imagining though, like who is going to be, because I do not doubt the ability of whoever is kind of got a bit more power or a bit more money or a bit more whatever to within any kind of society, digital or physical, to exploit other people, oppress other people. So I feel like somehow there would be a way to like put some people that, whether it's like they have to go through loads of like advertising before they interact with people in the real world or something because of the plan that they're on for their mind, like uploaded mind or whatever. Or I don't know, that's a kind of mild one, but do you know what I mean? Like, you say like resources, for example, it takes less resources, but like so that would be great, but like if we're talking about problem in the world now in terms of resources, it's not that there's not enough resources, it's about the distribution of them, really. So like
but the distribution of them is not trivial. It is not it's not the case that there's somebody who's literally writing a program to deny people like basic rights and comforts. I mean, that would be, I'm not saying it would be impossible, and the advertising description does actually feel quite real. I'm not saying there won't be inequities. It's just that I feel like it would be hard to imagine the inequities of a virtual world being as grim as those of reality.
But then that's the thing, is like, would everyone get, like, are we talking about a society where everyone just gets uploaded and like the world is just empty? Like everyone is just, or like all the bodies are just lying around, everyone is taking the the services of this 100% fatal startup, and
I doubt reality will ever lose its allure.
Yeah, but what if it's like only rich people can afford to live in reality?
To that part, actually, that sounds like a real
Like a horror movie.
risk, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh God, imagine you had to like basically migrating to the clouds because like you're an economic migrant to the
yeah,
clouds.
Oh, your God, you're right.
Oh no. It's so much bleaker than I thought. I was like, oh, Futurama heads in jars. That's
Um,
um,
well,
okay, but so maybe we should leave it on that bleak note.
well, I actually think I can take us straight from that bleak note into a
somewhere
topic.
even bleaker.
Well, somewhere that actually isn't bleak at all, I think, and poses an answer to maybe a question that wasn't explicitly stated there, but which I think was obvious, which is sort of what is life like in this simulated world, for example, or even in a future more broadly where various tasks have been automated. I'm wondering if I think it's actually too loud. I'm going to close that window. And the oh no, I can't fit through my blinds.
And Patrick falls out his window mid live stream. Exciting.
So, and one solution which is sort of surrounds my topic is games. Games defined most broadly refer to, I don't know, how would you define a game actually, John? Why don't we start there?
A game.
What is a game?
Oh God. Oh no, I feel like putting me in an awkward position since I have worked extensively, like facilitating drama workshops where I get to play games, and yet, I suppose a game is there's some kind of mutual understanding that we are playing, so that what happens here is but yeah, I mean rules comes to mind, but I don't know if that's really necessary for a game.
You're definitely describing features, and I've heard, and there are a variety of definitions that I've heard. A very broad one is just that it's kind of an organized activity where people have agreed upon the rules of how to achieve a particular goal, and it can be recreational, or it can be something like a competitive sport or something like that. So that's one definition that's used, and it covers a whole bunch of stuff. And I was listening to this actually Irish philosopher, John Danaher. He was doing a podcast, and he was talking about how automation was going to rise, and then he was talking about one of the different possible futures, sort of that we could consider both the negative outcomes and potentially positive outcomes. And one that he explored was a kind of a life which was based more around us engaging in games as a means of deriving satisfaction, mastery, all those kinds of things, as opposed to work. Because he basically he's of the opinion that work as it's structured today is mostly not nice for most people.
Okay, would this be with like a society where we have some kind of universal basic income or something?
Yeah, he basically he does mention that those possibilities, there are various ways in which you address the income issue, right? And we just posited one somewhat dystopian sounding one, which is put all the people who can't afford reality into a simulation. But regardless of what the solution is, the question remains, and I think it is a question worth considering because it's relevant to put about regardless of or in a number of outcomes it is relevant, which is how do we derive meaning and have valuable enjoyable lives if we haven't got work as the thing that defines us.
Mm-hmm.
And he settles on games as a very important solution. And of course, games are something we all engage in. You engage in these kind of group games for drama media purposes. Now, another type of game that we're all very familiar with, of course, is video games, and they're relevant in a big part because of just how much investment there is in video games, how much it's been growing, and how it's where you get the kind of cutting edge of game environments, allowing people to connect with each other across very different spaces to engage in very particular niches, using systems that are more and more immersive, etc., etc. So, yeah, the expectation that games will continue to get a lot better anyway, I think is kind of realistic. I'd be curious, like, what's your take? What do you think the odds are that in like 10 years you'll be playing an hour of video games or 2 hours a week or something like that?
So you're asking specifically to me, the
because I know you don't
never plays video games.
I'm aware.
What's the likelihood that it will become so prolific, not prolific, so ubiquitous that even I will start playing games? Is that it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I somehow I somehow can't see it. I know it's not a crazy proposition.
Yeah.
Talking about like putting my head in a jar. Like I feel like it is it's because it's already so present. Like we talked before about video games and how now or by video games also meaning like games on phones, like apps and stuff, and how like kind of middle-aged women are apparently like one of the biggest markets for games on phones, in terms of that they actually spend money, like a market that they'll spend money on the apps. But like maybe it's possible.
Yeah,
that I would do it. I just kind of meant like what kind of games? Like is that like what I'd be playing?
I was being a bit vague because it's hard to be very specific. So yeah, I think that the odds are actually quite high. The rate at which people are playing more and more games is pretty striking. Like I think there was a year-on-year increase I was looking at the breakdown of various demographics, but it was something like a 20 to 30% increase that took place over 1 year. Now I'm not sure if that rate I presume didn't stay as high as it was, but that reflects obviously different demographics being affected by different kind of games, and the definition of what is a game kind of is expanding. So Pokemon Go is one that it still feels very much like a video game because it's based off a Game Boy game, but it definitely had people doing very different things. Now I would argue that when you see people running around in a park wearing a band and they're connected to the Runkeeper app and it's gamifying them, you're also getting kind of a growth of the influence of games. And now the kind of with this VR, which is becoming much more accessible, and there's lots of good games being developed for it, but there's also augmented reality, and in theory that's sort of what Pokemon Go is, but with augmented reality goggles, or the ones I've seen kind of look like these steampunk goggles, then you could imagine, I guess I'd ask you, is this a video game? If you had people who were like playing football in the park and they also had AR goggles on that were like making it seem like they were in a stadium and maybe doing some cool effects when they kick the ball in certain ways, just like a video game, would that be a video game?
I don't know.
Because I think at that point it breaks out a little bit, and it's that if those things became amazing, it's what I would expect to take people, perhaps even like yourself, who previously haven't played at all, and just be like, okay, well I have to try this kind of thing.
Yeah, but to be, I don't know. Like I think maybe I'm a good person in a way for you to be like discussing this with, because I think I'm just very skeptical about that kind of stuff, because I think because I am so often, and maybe it's also why I don't really engage in video games, is that I don't necessarily need, because I do engage in a lot of kind of analog like games and play like through like my work and like working, like doing workshops with people, and so like I'm very much, I suppose, in the analog game, which is also becoming increasingly popular. Like there's this great festival in Berlin, I can't remember what it's called, but and they have it in a lot of different places, more and more cities now, where it's basically like kind of analog team games, but there's not like with no kind of like augmented reality or things like that, but just things where like in or dress up weird or have things with like not sport but these sort of weird, strange, invented games. People come and they've come and they pitch their own, people invent games and stuff. So but yeah, obviously that's still a niche thing compared to video games. But yeah, like it's probably is going to keep growing, but I just still I don't know. I still just don't see how big it would get. Like, but I think like
because I think
the one key thing is like the social interaction. Like you talked about people, people who play with people in different countries. They don't strangers they don't know in other countries. Like over the like because they're connected over the internet and they're like chatting to them and stuff. And that's like there's a huge culture there, subculture, if you can call it subculture or whatever, there of people who do that kind of stuff. And then this is a way you can engage with people like strangers in another country because you're like, oh, we both like this game, so we're gonna chat and talk. Like I think that there's something said about the social side of it as well, connecting to other people.
And and as kind of from the previous episode that was discussed, I think it's realistic to imagine that social interaction could become more and more appealing,
gamified,
and or just kind of real seeming or interesting to people as certain technologies improve. But what would you say to the fact that I mean, this isn't like some, I'm not judging you for not playing enough video games, but obviously
oh, are you not
in a version of the future where people engage more with these kinds of products and experiences with their free time, and it takes up an increasing amount of it. That is one alternative to the that's part of a broader suite of things like working remotely, etc., that can facilitate a reduction in travel, but in kind of use of a lot of different infrastructure. I mean, I don't personally think I'm gonna hole up and play video games as some kind of ethical stance, but I do think that it's clearly a low carbon activity.
Well, it's actually quite a lot to the virtual tourism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That exists, and so I think there's some similar. Yeah, because doing games and what you do in like. So this is much more like games than we will.
I'm gonna have to stop you because
when we take holidays virtually.
I think I caught a little bit of that, but really not very much. Your sound quality, which has been a bit sketchy before, is now super sketchy.
Oh no.
We'll see. There, that was fine. I heard you say those words good, but I missed everything else before.
Oh well. Well, this was very interesting anyway.
I think you were.
But yes, you continue to speak then. If my
Yeah, I think okay. I think I heard you say that, which was the speaking. Well, I guess we haven't got a huge amount of time left, and
you continue speaking.
I'll just like kind of wrap it up a little bit. So, I guess what I feel I haven't really made a great case about is just how much could potentially be offered in these virtual spaces. It's not the case now. I'm not running to buy any of these products. And a lot of this doesn't actually require that you're in a VR environment. Plenty of people, can fully make the cognitive leaps between just looking at a screen and reading information or whatever. Although the AR does offer the possibility of actively doing exercise and stuff while experiencing these worlds, and that I think is actually hugely significant, and it's something that is on the cards today, but still not terribly functional or very widespread. But I think that the fact that people could not just do some amazing adventure or whatever, but actually have, had a physical sense and the physical exertion and of course the health benefits of engaging in that. I think that would be a bit of a game changer in terms of reaching over to a lot of people. Obviously, I kind of decided to stay away from brain-computer interface for this one, just because I was just gonna get so lost. But since it came up anyway, the idea that we would have, if we could successfully upload the means of kind of interfacing is the part that I think gets really mind blowing. The idea that like if you like you were saying, you've got these clients or whatever, and they're connected and they're living in this virtual space. Well, if they can interact with tools, whether they be cognitive tools or just simulated tools in their space directly through again stuff that came up in the previous episodes, but in this case it would just be using computer software because they're in the system, then you quickly, I think, you start to imagine just an explosion of possibility that a lot of internet hypothesizers like to talk about, but namely the singularity. But that's why it sort of gets confusing. But then the last thing I suppose that he this is actually more coming from your man who I mentioned earlier, John Danaher, is that he makes an argument that is actually less narrow than the whole video game explosion of virtual space stuff. He's referring to games as in the original definition as the kind of most broadly these shared activities that work towards goals, and he's kind of envisaging a society where we are in an informed way determining what kinds of games we want to play and sort of facilitating it, given the lack of pressure on performing work for some kind of subsistence. And he makes the point that we've been talking about virtual worlds only in this, like, when your senses are changing, but he uses a definition that basically means that as we become more aware of the arbitrary nature of the kind of rules and games that we play in life, then it becomes more virtual as a function of that. It becomes more something that's decided upon and less something that's sort of imposed upon by reality. Now, I didn't fully get into the descriptions there, but I think that it basically, if you combine the now I've just been talking for so long. Those were the last two ideas.
I can't be heard, so I might as well just...
No, now I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
That was just an attempt to somehow link what were actually not fully linked points to hit all of them before too late, given that I've lost.
Well, it is interesting, like, concept, the idea of, like, how important, how big a role will both virtual space and sort of games and gaming, like, kind of digitally kind of assisted, that's the word, like, gaming be a part of our lives. Like, it is, I think I think especially about because I think if you're posing the question, will people we do much more and in their free time, like as entertainment, use much more, say, virtual reality, augmented reality, gaming, connecting with other people, like, across the internet and doing some kind of, like, pure gaming. I think if you say it to, like, right now in the last couple of months when people have spent so much time kind of, like, online, okay, not via VR, but because of the circumstances at the moment, some people have to like be online to do everything. I think if you said, like, in our current physical body form, there probably is a point when it's like a saturation point of, like, screens and this whole thing of kind of like the Zoom fatigue and our eyeballs and the screens, and like need to have fresh air sometimes, a bit of vitamin D. It's a different question if, like, it'll probably get more and more popular. It's like, okay, people will do it for X amount of like, so I want to go to bars and see people in real life. But if we're talking about the uploaded mind, like, then it's sort of like, if we're not anymore shackled to our our skin that needs to be outside our eyeballs that, like, can't be in this VR world for too long or whatever, then it's different. Like, then it is an interesting question to think of if we do live in some sort of future, or some of us, there is an aspect of the future which is like in some kind of strange simulated world where we are these disembodied things, which we didn't really talk about, but, like, could you be both? Can you be, like, a present body in the physical world, but then also have, like, this other simulated version of yourself that you can shift between the consciousnesses of, or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, some kind of distribution, I suppose, or connection.
Then it kind of explodes the kind of possibilities of, like
um,
what
yeah,
yeah
your sound
what kind of lives we would live, or what kind of games
yeah,
we
your
would
sound is definitely like
play.
you
Break
you
up.
you'll probably, yeah, the sound
Um,
is totally gone. I mean, it's even before there's a lot of. I think we're losing around 40% of what you're saying, which is a shame.
it's trying to make a good point there, I think.
I heard some good points or parts of good point, but just
Parts of good
I
point.
think we're gonna have to call it, both because I
Mm.
am not prepared to dive back into a ramble the likes of which we just heard, and because I can't hear your tempering of rambling with concise points and questions, mostly points.
Oh no.
So, sorry
Sad.
about that, listeners, for the technical issues towards the end. We will be back next week with hopefully,
Hopefully less technical issues.
yeah, and all the fun future possibilities that we like to talk about.